Did you know that Carl Jung believed that art was the universal language that held the collective together, and creative self-expression could reveal insights into a person's psyche and their shadow? In this video, I'm going to explain and break down how Carl Jung viewed the human psyche, as well as give you insights into the shadow and give you some art therapy techniques or some activities that you can do on your own, so that way you can reveal what may be coming through from your unconscious. Hello, I'm Desiree and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am currently a graduate student with a concentration in therapeutic arts. A few weeks ago, as I was learning about Jungian Art Therapy, I thought that it would be a really great idea to create a video and share it with you if you are interested in learning how to do shadow work in creative ways. So if you're not aware of Carl Jung, he was a psychoanalyst from the early 1900s, and he did have a close relationship with Freud, who Freud is considered to be the father of psychology. Now, even though these two could believe in the theory of dreams, there was some debate on what's going on in a person's unconscious mind. To help you understand how Carl Jung viewed the human psyche, I created a diagram that I'm going to put on screen, and I'm going to read an excerpt from my textbook and the chapter on Jungian Art Therapy. And I'm also going to use this book, The Undiscovered Self by Carl Jung, to help you understand the shadow whenever we get there. I don't think I mentioned that before. What you're currently looking at right now at the screen is this image I created of the map of the psyche according to Carl Jung. And this is an excerpt from my textbook on how to interpret what or how Carl Jung viewed the human psyche. Imagine a circle divided in half with a horizontal line. The top half represents consciousness and the bottom half the unconscious, which contains the personal and collective unconscious. The collective unconscious holds cultural content as well as ancestral, archaic material that resides furthest from consciousness. Based on his research and clinical observations, verbalizations, dreams, cross-cultural patterns, and symbols, Jung defined the collective unconscious as the quote-unquote, the whole spiritual heritage of mankind's evolution born anew in the brain structure of every individual. These conceptual areas of the psyche are energetically linked by the progression and regression of libidinal energy, referred to by Jung as psychic energy. The ego resides in the seat of consciousness, serving as an orienting principle that contains identity, experiences, memories, and feelings. It expresses itself through the persona, also known as the mask, which is either introverted or extroverted typology. What is disavowed or unwanted by the ego is considered shadow and remains in the unconscious until it is recognized by the ego. The ego engages with the shadow content from the personal and collective unconscious through overpowering encounters with personal complexes. These are autonomous feelings, toned images, or our thoughts that contain archetypes. These are just patterns. And at the core of these archetypes is the capacity to alter or transform ego consciousness. For instance, we may encounter someone with whom we wish to impress. That's the part of the persona. But we actually doubt ourselves. That's the shadow. And in this conflict, we reject the feelings, yet we may have particular autonomous thoughts and behaviors. Those are the complex indicators. When we confront our complex, which we make it more conscious with art making and metaphors, we discover the archetypal patterns at the core of the complex, which then provides an expanded transpersonal view of our personal situation. So hopefully you have a little bit more of an understanding of how Carl Jung viewed the map of the human psyche. If you have any questions, comment them down below and I can expand upon it further, because I know this can be a little complex sometimes. But let's talk about this whole integration of the shadow and why it was so important according to Carl Jung and psychotherapy. So Carl Jung was really big on individuation. Now, individuation means that the person is to integrate their shadows or integrate unconscious parts of themselves into their conscious parts of themselves so that way they can become a complete individual. And he felt that this process of individuation is heavily reliant upon self-knowledge. And I'm going to read to you from this book here about what he says about that. Most people confuse self-knowledge with knowledge of their conscious ego personalities. Anyone who has ego consciousness at all takes it for granted that he knows himself. But the ego knows only its own contents, not the unconscious and its contents. People measure their self-knowledge by what the average person in their social environment knows of himself, but not the real psychic facts, which are for the most part hidden from them. What is commonly called self-knowledge is therefore a very limited knowledge, most of it dependent upon social factors of what goes on in the human psyche. So in short, what Carl Jung was saying was that what we know as self-knowledge is actually very limited. So it's actually a really good idea to do what we call shadow work, or to some reflection into the subconscious, so that way we can become a more integrated human being and know ourselves deeper. So now I'm going to give you 3 art activities that you can do on your own. First, we're going to start with mandalas. So if you wanted to create a mandala on your own, you would use paint, or you can use markers, crayons, a pencil, essentially any materials that you have on hand, and you would begin creating a mandala. You can create a circle in the middle of the page that represents yourself, and you would just draw whatever comes to mind. The second art therapy activity that I'm going to share with you is just a free-form drawing. Now, free-form drawing is really popular in art therapy for various reasons, but for Jungian perspective is that whenever you take a blank piece of paper and you begin painting, you begin drawing, or you begin creating upon it, what you want to do is you don't want to pre-think about anything at all. You just want to go at it. And that's going to be an indication of what is coming through from your unconscious. And the third art activity that I'm going to share with you is to draw your dreams. Now, Carl Jung was really big on dream analysis, and whenever you draw your dreams, right upon waking up, you would then analyze it, because it's through dreams that the collective unconscious and your shadow and the unconscious is speaking to you. That's how Carl Jung viewed dreams. Now, after you have these finished artwork pieces done, we're then going to analyze it to see what's coming through from your unconscious parts of your brain, including your shadow. So whenever you're looking at your art and you're analyzing it from a Jungian art perspective, you want to take note of what he referred to as the anima and animus. So the anima is the unconscious feminine aspect of a man's psyche, while the unconscious masculine aspect of a woman's psyche is referred to as the animus, both of which can be integrated to become what he called the eros and the logos. So essentially what Jung is saying here is that every person, whether you're a man or a woman, has a repressed aspect of their personality that is of the opposite gender, or there are traits commonly associated with the opposite gender that we repress within ourselves because of societal influences or upbringing influences. It doesn't really matter why. It's just that these are repressed parts of ourselves that we have to integrate. So these are what's in the shadow. So that's something that you want to look at. So when you're analyzing your work, see if there's any masculine or feminine parts coming through your art. Ask yourself what this could mean. The second thing that's really big on Jungian art therapy is looking for specific symbols. Now, these symbols can be animals, they can be objects, it could be whatever you consistently draw within your artwork is a good indication of a symbol. In Jungian art therapy, you would also look at the 12 archetypes, or you would look at your art and try to identify if any of the 12 archetypes are coming through. And I'm going to explain to you now what those 12 archetypes might be. So let me share with you the 12 archetypes by Jung, and these archetypes can be embodied in any objects that you find within your art. So it can be embodied through an animal, it can be embodied through an inanimate object, or any person that may be coming through during your art creation process. So the first archetype is the innocent, and the innocent is the embodiment of goodness and optimism. If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, I want you to think of Forrest Gump as being like the epitome of the innocent, because in that movie, despite the trials that he faces, he still maintained a pure childlike nature or innocence. The next up is the orphan, and the orphan is kind of referred to as somewhat like the regular person. The orphan is just like you and me, but they yearn for connection and belonging in a community. A good example of this is Harry Potter. Their challenge lies in overcoming feelings of victimhood and finding their place in the world. Next is the hero. Now, the hero is the person that steps up, and they're determined and they're courageous, and they aim to make the world a better place. So this you can think of as Wonder Woman or any kind of action hero who fights relentlessly for justice. Now, the hero's challenge is that sometimes they may face arrogance and they have an inability to accept their limitation. Next is the caregiver, and the caregiver is selfless and generous. A good example of this is Mother Teresa. She serves as a real life example because she dedicated her life to helping others. Now, the caregiver's challenge here is to avoid being exploited, and they also need to learn to care for themselves. Okay, next up is the explorer. The explorer is restless and adventurous. Good example of this is Indiana Jones. He has an insatiable curiosity. The explorer's challenge is to find balance for their thirst and the comforts of home. Next up is the rebel. And the rebel or the outlaw is the person that breaks the traditional mold. They challenge norms or societal norms. And you can kind of think of Katniss Everdeen, who was the main character in the Hunger Games, if you've ever seen that. But essentially, the rebel challenges the everyday norms, but their own personal challenge is to use their disruptive energy constructively rather than destructively. Okay, next up is the lover. The lover is passionate and they're committed. So you can think of Romeo and Juliet as the epitome of passionate love, and that's what's represented in this archetype. Now, the lover's challenge is to love themselves as much as they love others, and they need to avoid dependency. Next archetype is the creator. Now, the creator is the one who is imaginative and they are visionary. You can think of Steve Jobs with his innovative approach to technology and creating, the Apple iPhone. The creator's challenge is to bring their dreams to fruition without losing themselves in their imagination. So the creator has to struggle with being lost in their imagination and learn how to balance themselves and come down to reality so that way their dreams and their visions can manifest. Next is the jester. Now, the jester brings joy and laughter. You can think of the genie from Aladdin with his constant jokes and antics. Okay, that's pretty much a jester. Any comedian you can think of, they're the archetype of the jester. Now, the jester's challenge is to understand that life isn't always fun and games, and they need to balance their sense of seriousness or understand that seriousness has its place. The sage. The sage is the person who seeks truth and wisdom. You can think of Gandalf from The Lord of the Rings with his extensive knowledge and wisdom, or you can think of any modern day sage. What comes to my mind right now is Sadhguru. He's the epitome of this archetype. Now, the sage's challenge is to avoid becoming too dogmatic and overly critical. Next up is the magician. The magician creates change and transformation. So you can think of Dumbledore from Harry Potter, where he had magical abilities and transformative influence. The magician's challenge is to use their power wisely and not for manipulation. Next up is the ruler. The ruler is the person who seeks control and order. So you can think of Arthur and his strong leadership and a structured kingdom. Now, the ruler is pretty much anybody that you would see in a position of power or political power. And the ruler's challenge is to not become too authoritarian or inflexible. So those are the 12 archetypes. Now, remember, those 12 archetypes are not just like characters in stories. They can be aspects that you may find within yourself, aspects that or traits you may find within others. And whenever you are analyzing your art or an art therapy, you want to look and see if any of those objects or your art is a reflective of any of those archetypes and those themes within that archetype. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit that like button. It really does help me to understand whether I should make more videos like this, and it gives me just a general direction of what kind of videos you want to see. And if you're interested in learning more about art therapy on your healing journey, be sure to check out this video right here.